Who done it? That's the question surrounding the Nordstream gas pipeline blast that occurred several days ago. Nord Stream 2 was hit in the early morning hours. Then 17 hours later, Nord Stream 1 was taken down by what seismologists say were explosions, not earthquakes. But no one has come forward taking responsibility, so we're left with playing the guessing game of who done it. Was it the Russians who blew up their own lines? Many are speculating that it was. Was it the Americans? After all, Biden promised to end the lines if Russia invaded Ukraine.
If Russia invades, that means tanks or troops crossing the border of Ukraine again. Then there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
How will you do that exactly, since the project and control of the project is within Germany's control?
We will, I promise you, we'll be able to do it.
Was it Ukraine themselves or Finland or someone else? Who benefits the most? That's the first big, obvious question. Well, Jackson Hinckle has been covering this story on his show, The Dive with Jackson Hinckle. Jackson, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on.
Okay, so I have my speculation of who I think did it. I'm curious who you think did it. I think it was Poland. That's going to be my guess. Who do you think or have you even made an assumption?
I think it was done with, and I imagine you probably agree, with the help of U.S. intelligence. The official state actor as to who actually sent the team or the UAV underwater, mine down there is up to, further investigation. But I think this couldn't have been done without U.S. approval and intelligence.
Yeah. So let's start off with, let's go through the various different actors who may have done it, because this is what everyone's doing right now, is speculating who had the motivation to do it. And we, of course, here in Western media, what are we saying? They're pointing the finger at Russia, saying that Russia would have blown up their own gas pipelines, which doesn't seem to make sense to me. What do you think of the possibility of Russia? Why would Russia do this? And why wouldn't they do this?
Well, it doesn't really make a lot of sense for Russia to have done this. I mean, we know that days prior to this incident taking place, literally 10 days before these pipelines exploded, we saw Reuters come out and report that Putin was telling officials in the European Union, in Germany in particular, that, look, if you guys drop the sanctions on Russia, if you assumedly stop the support for the proxy war in Ukraine, then we'll reopen the flow in the Nord Stream pipelines.
Right.
And this is something that they could hold over the European Union's head. By destroying the infrastructure of the Nord Stream pipelines, they effectively would have canceled out that leverage that they'd have in any future negotiation. So Why would they destroy the infrastructure when they could do something as simple as turning the tap off on the pipelines themselves from Russia without completely nuking the whole plan?
Yeah, which they had. I mean, neither of them had been operational at this point. Nord Stream 2 never went into operation. It was available, ready to go, but they decided not to turn it on because they were sanctioning Russia essentially for the invasion of Ukraine. And then the second one needed repair, and they were in the middle of repairing it, so that one was not functional either. You're right, it doesn't make any sense for Russia to actually do this. There's so many speculations saying it was Russia who did it, it's why would they eliminate their only bargaining chip? I mean, that was their bargaining chip, knowing that in the winter is coming, and Europe would start freezing, and that would actually be the leverage that Russia would have to get Europe to stop funding Ukraine, to stop giving them weapons, and instead encourage negotiation because they were wanting to at least, stop their populations from freezing. That was their leverage and their bargaining chip. So it doesn't make any sense that they would then blow that up, literally.
Yeah, and also, I mean, they had gas that was prepared to be, flowing through the pipelines. Hypothetically, if they were to fix those turbine issues on the pipeline on the Nord Stream 1. And we know that gas has gone up, not in smoke, in bubbles. It's entered into the Baltic Sea. So they're losing a lot of money, and they're losing also the billions of dollars of investment and the years of work and resources that they put into building those pipelines.
Right.
Germany requested in the case of Nord Stream 2. So it just makes no sense that it would be Russia.
Yeah, and they're also saying that if they don't rapidly repair those pipelines, that they're going to have some erosion from seawater, and they're never going to be operational. So this could have just blown up billions upon billions of dollars worth of infrastructure for Russia and income that would have flowed into the country, figuratively and literally, I suppose. So Russia doesn't seem to make sense. Now, the people, though, that claim that it was Russia, they say they think it was Russia because this would then allow Russia to point the finger at, it's like a false flag is what they're sort of trying to claim, that Russia did it, but then they're pointing the finger at others so that they then would be able to engage in warfare with other countries like the United States or Poland or someone else. But that doesn't seem to make any sense either.
No. Without getting into details, if anyone's guilty of false flags throughout this war in Ukraine and, all the previous wars of the past, several decades, it would be the Western powers, not Russia. Russia's been pretty, they call their balls and strikes in the war in Ukraine and when it came to Syria. And it just is not, this isn't the type of leadership that we've seen from Putin thus far in the war, like him or not. This isn't characteristic, at least, of something he'd do. And for the aforementioned reasons, it just really doesn't make sense. And I think there's a lot of details I'm sure we're going to discuss that point to other actors.
Yeah, so let's talk. So this is why I think it was Poland. When I look at it, who has the most to benefit from this action? And it, to me, would be Poland. So there was the very next day, right? So these explosions happened, taking Nord Stream 2 and 1 out of commission, potentially permanently. And then the very next day, the Baltic pipe goes online, right? So this one, or actually, did this go online on the same day?
I think it was the same day.
The same exact day, the Baltic pipe goes up, and that one is from Norway. I believe Poland to Norway is where this gas pipeline goes. And suddenly it goes online when Nord Stream 2 is taken down. So you've got the financial benefit, the financial incentive for Poland to want to destroy the competition. Also, I think they probably figure that if Russia figures out that it's them and it triggers an invasion, for example, of Poland, then, and of course, no one in the West would believe that Poland sabotaged the Nord Stream 2, because all of the propaganda, all of the, what's being put out there now is that Russia did it. So then if Russia finds out that it's Poland, then Poland would potentially go under attack by Russia, maybe invade, or they would start having some various attacks. And then it would kind of prove what they've been claiming all along, which is the reason why we have to help Ukraine is because it doesn't stop at Ukraine. It goes on. And so if once Ukraine's taken, then they're going to go after Poland, or they're going to go after, XYZ, the Baltics, right? They're trying to expand their empire. So it would be this, well, okay, if they figure out it's us, they come after us, then we could point the finger back and say, see, we told you so. This was going to happen. They were going to come after us. So that's why I think it was Poland.
It's an interesting idea. It's very possible that it could be them again. We don't know.
We don't know. We're all just speculating. But I don't know who else really truly has a lot to benefit from it. What do you think the U.S. gains from besides the fact of Biden coming out and saying, if Russia invades, we're going to take down these Nord Stream pipelines and we've got our ways, basically. Despite that, besides that, what motivation do you think the United States has in taking down those pipelines?
I think that the United States probably has even more to gain or to continue than Poland has to gain from this scenario, because there were talks from the Turks and the Saudis who have been very close with the Russians in trying to mediate a peace deal surrounding the Ukraine war since it began. Saudis more recently. There were talks 10 days ago during the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting that just took place. I think it was in Uzbekistan. And they were saying that German officials, and particularly German military officials, were looking to talk with the Russians over establishing some sort of a peace deal, or, maybe beginning to mediate the reduction of sanctions on Russia. And they were going to do this through, again, leveraging that Nord Stream 1 pipeline flow and potentially Nord Stream 2. The United States obviously would view all of this, and the EU largely, I think, would probably view this as a threat to not just the continuation of the war in Ukraine if this went down, a peace deal, but also they would stand to lose a lot in terms of their political favorability in their own countries. If the war in Ukraine stops, the people of these respective European countries won't be able to point the finger at Putin and blame him for the energy crisis that they're about to witness and live through and the subsequent economic crisis. They will have to point the finger at their own leaders. And the U.S. also won't be able to continue their military industrial complex gravy train of, funneling tens of billions of dollars into Ukraine for this proxy war. So to put it simply, and to reflect on a moment in history, though I'm not comparing Biden to Hernan Cortez, I want to compare the actions of the two. Because when Cortez landed in the New World in 1519 with his 600 men and a fleet of ships, and they were to take over the new land and conquer the Aztec Empire, what Cortez did was actually burn up all the ships upon arrival. And he did that to send a message to his men that there's no turning back. Don't think about, going home and losing. You have to win. It's kind of what the U.S. hypothetically could have done in this scenario, signaling to the EU that there's no turning back. Right. Don't think about negotiating a peace deal over this Nordstream pipeline situation. We need to continue this war.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, so there certainly is a motive there. I think the UK would have a similar motive on that, which is, don't even think about, don't even hesitate. And then if you just take away the option to hesitate and to even say, well, maybe we should negotiate, maybe we should stop because we need to turn these gas pipelines back on. It does give that temptation that is now eliminated. So certainly, and maybe even on that point, the EU themselves would have a reason to blow up the pipelines also, to just say, now we don't give the populations, the politicians would be able to continue supporting the war without pressure from the populations, because the population can no longer say, hey, do what's right, get these pipelines going. They can turn around to their constituents now and say, we can't.
Yeah. I get what you're saying, though, about Poland, because Poland also has now become, I believe, the largest supplier of gas to all of Europe after this took place with the Baltic pipeline opening. So, yeah, again, I think it could be something. I mean, the Baltic Sea is effectively a NATO lake. It could be something where maybe it was an EU member state who actually carried out the task, and it did so with, the City of London and Wall Street's approval. Who knows? There was one bit of information that was, and I have confirmed this, that was really interesting to me. So about 10 days prior to this taking place on the Nord Stream pipelines, there was an expeditionary detachment of U.S. Navy ships led by the USS Kearsarge, and it was 30 kilometers away from the site of sabotage on the Nord Stream 1 pipeline and 50 kilometers away from the site of sabotage on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. What it was doing there, we don't know, but it is a little bit suspicious. And there was also like a U.S. Navy fleet that was there doing like experimentation on unmanned underwater vehicles that do mine hunting operations. So interesting stuff to look at. It's not a clear-cut case, but it definitely poses some questions.
Well, and then we also have this, the shared post on Twitter. I believe it's been deleted. Has this one been deleted by the Polish MEP, former Foreign Affairs and Defense Minister Radek Sikorski? Said, "Thank you, USA," with a picture of the blast, pointing the finger at the United States. I mean, saying, thanks, you did this for us. We love it. Yeah. And Poland, of course, benefiting. So that has since been removed. I know he did get a lot of backlash on that from other Polish government officials who said this is irresponsible. You're feeding into Russian propaganda because this is what the Russians are claiming. But there you have it, a former foreign affairs and defense minister saying, thanks, USA. But again, I think that could be deflecting. I think maybe the Poles did it. I just think that they have the most to gain from this. I think the United States doesn't need to blow up the pipelines in order to strong arm Europe. I think that, of course, Europe would have, there would be temptation to want to go and negotiate to get those gas pipelines turned back on, especially as people are freezing over the winter, for sure. But I still think the United States has a lot of leverage over Europe that would, I don't know if they really thought, our influence is slipping that much to where we have to actually go to the level of sabotage. And it would risk war, right? I mean, that really, if the United States does that, not that I'm saying that they're very smart, but it would be very dumb to blatantly risk war, actual direct conflict with Russia, because that is an act of war, obviously blowing up those pipelines. And I don't know if Poland is that worried. I think Poland, on the other hand, kind of is like a honey badger on that. Like, I don't care.
Yeah.
So that's why I still think I really believe if we're going to play the gas leak theory, I do think it was Poland. I mean, now some are saying it would have been maybe the Baltic states, but like Finland even. I don't know what motivation Finland would have in blowing up the gas pipeline. Can you figure that one out?
No, I couldn't. And I'd also ask the question, and some others have brought this up as well. We have to think about whether or not the countries that we're discussing as hypothetical, the hypothetical criminal here, would they have the technology to facilitate something like this? I heard the gentleman at the Duran and Gonzalo Lira discussing this, and they're like, frankly, because they brought up Ukraine, maybe it was Ukraine.
Right.
Frankly, Ukraine wouldn't have the technology, they were saying, to be able to facilitate something like this. So I don't know if it would have been them. I think, if anything, you bring up a good point with Poland, and I think the U.S. in particular could. The other thing I'll say, though, about Germany and why they might be kind of working against the interests of the United States is because of how dire the situation's getting in Germany. I mean, you have basically every single major industry in Germany that's probably going to become insolvent and have to shut down operations or, partake in major layoffs. You're going to have them go without energy this winter. And it's not just going to be a one winter issue. This is going to last multiple years. So I don't know. I think this could be something that, say, Olaf Scholz or Baerbock or Habeck could look at and say, maybe the U.S. isn't guiding us down the best path right now.
Yeah, and I definitely think the European people should be very angry about this. I mean, if anybody needs to know, this is kind of like the lab leak theory, the gas leak theory on it is important to know who did it, because that is a direct offense, particularly against the European people, who are going to be very cold this winter and facing very high gas prices. Even with that gas coming in from Poland, it's going to be extremely expensive because it's going to be limited supply. They're going to be facing a very tough, difficult, cold winter. And the European people should view this as an act of war against them, no matter who did it, whether it be the United States, Poland, Russia, or Ukraine even. I do think Ukraine has a lot of motivation to do it, if not besides Poland and the money making and the helping Poland kind of defend themselves against Russia, what they would perceive as Russia wanting to try to invade them or something. Beyond them, I do think Ukraine obviously has the most to gain, because it would be then Europe can't turn back. Europe has just got to stick with us because they don't have any alternatives anymore. They can't start freezing and then get cold feet and want to turn around and say, actually, let's go ahead and negotiate and force Ukraine to negotiate. So I do think they have a huge motivation in doing it as well, maybe the biggest motivation. But again, it comes down to, could they have pulled it off? And I agree. I'm not sure if they could have, if they had the technology or the ability, but, and to go undetected in those waters. Poland, the United States, UK. There's a lot of actors that could have been there and nobody would have blinked an eye. They wouldn't have thought twice about it. But if Russians were there, I'm sure everybody would have noticed.
Yeah.
Although they're there, because it's their pipeline. But still, it's I think people are keeping a closer eye on what they're doing compared to some of the others that could kind of do some things over here without people paying attention.
The other thing about Ukraine also is they haven't shut off every single last pipeline that runs through their country that flows Russian gas. So hypothetically, you think maybe they do that before they go blow up the Nordstream 1 and 2 pipelines. I don't know. Right.
It'd be easier to cover up and be like, whoops, war. I don't know. It just, a bomb dropped, hit the wrong place. Yeah, that would be easier. You're right. So, I'm sure we're going to be following this gas leak theory for a while and trying to figure out who did it, because it is, I think, important to find out who did do something this callous against the European people. But I'm glad you were able to be on here.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, not silencing me.
Yes.